Hey there, starting my Instagram Live. I hope everybody's doing well. Nobody's logged on yet, but eventually you will be. And how's it going? How are you doing? Justin, you're the first one to join. Max, you're the second one to join. Steve, you're the third one to join. Hey, so I don't know. I feel like right now we're in this kind of waiting period where it seems like the news is getting a little bit more clear. Right? It's seeing like, okay, there's not going to be, a month ago or a few weeks ago, people were saying on the news that there might be millions and millions of deaths around the world. Now it's pretty clear that that's not going to be the case. Everyone was saying the economy might have to be shut down for 18 months. Now it's pretty clear that's not going to be the case. So a lot of things have gotten much more clear. So again, this is repeating what I've been saying for 3 weeks, but now the data is starting to show that we've been correct, is that the peak in New York City probably has already happened. The peak in the United States will probably happen in a week, give or take a few days. And that doesn't mean that the virus is over, but it just means it'll stabilize. It won't be exponentially growing anymore. I mean, here's some interesting data, and maybe I'll wait for a few more people to log on before I show some data. But my main point is that things are starting to clear up. We're starting to get a lot more knowledge about what's happening, a lot more certainty. Things are going from uncertainty to certainty. And you know the reason why I know that is because the stock market now is kind of drifting up again. I mean, Amazon is almost back to all-time highs again. And so that suggests to me that you can view the stock market as sort of this barometer of uncertainty in the world. The more uncertain people are, the more the stock market goes down. Like, forget about money. Just look at the stock market as a measure of how uncertain people are. So if the stock market is going up or down 10% in a day, but particularly down, that means everyone's scared and everybody in the world is uncertain. But if the market kind of starts to drift up, it means we're kind of holding on to the things that are a little more certain. Like, we got this stimulus package. In a week, maybe we'll start getting checks from it. We got this, New York City hospitalizations are down day over day over day over day. So New York City, which is a large bulk of the hospitalizations around the country, even around the world, is starting to peak. Italy and Spain have started to peak. So uncertainty, which was huge just 2 weeks ago, has started to move into certainty. And so the way we measure that is, and again, this has nothing to do with money or finance, but the way you measure the uncertainty versus certainty in the world is look at the stock market. If the stock market starts going up 0.5% a day, 1% a day, 1.5% a day, that's a little more certainty. By the way, 10% up is a very bad sign. That means, oh my gosh, we were all wrong yesterday. Now we all think this today. That's still a little too panicky. But now that the market's going up, 1% here, 1% there, maybe it's down 1%, then it's up 2% again. Now's the time when you start looking for stocks to buy, investments to make. You start planning, what does it look like when I leave my house 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, when the economy starts to reopen? There will be a new normal. There's not going to be a worst case scenario. The worst case scenario I was afraid of was, total breakdown of society. You have to make an appointment to stand online for the grocery store, chaos, government owns all the grocery stores, all the other stores closed. That was the worst case scenario. That's not going to happen. Now I think a worst case scenario is what's going to happen to all the other people who are sick. So how much of this is certainty versus the Fed pumping money into the system? That's a great question. So there's two types of uncertainty that have occurred during this, and there's a third type, which I'll get to in a second. But there's three types of uncertainty. The first was we had no idea what the danger of the coronavirus was. We didn't know the fatality rate. We didn't know the contagion rate. We didn't know if temperature affected it. We didn't know if there was a timeline on it. We didn't know if young people would get it, old people would get it, and on and on and on. And so now we have so much data coming in. I mean, there are 30 different companies now working on actually approved medical trials for cures for coronavirus. So this is like incredibly good news. We have there's a lot of evidence. I know this is like a political debate, but I don't give a shit. Like, there's a lot of evidence that hydroxychloroquine works, particularly when put together with certain antibiotics. Like, who knows? But that's what actual doctors are telling me. I'm not waiting for the government to tell me it. Actual doctors are telling me that if you think you have coronavirus, under medical supervision, take this drug, which has been approved for use for 80 years for malaria and is an incredibly strong drug. It's antiviral, it's antibacterial, it's anti-everything, and who knows? But even if that one doesn't work, then even if hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, there's 30 other drugs being tested right now. So what's going to happen is, after we achieve this new normal, everyone's going to be worried about a second wave. But even that we're getting some more confidence about, which is that, drugs will be ready and available, if not to cure, but at least to alleviate symptoms, the second wave or the second season of this. And by the way, the average flu season, you're not allowed to say that this is like the flu, and it's not like the flu, it's very different. But the average flu season in the world is about 600 to 750,000 deaths per year, and coronavirus looks like maybe, right now there's about 60,000 deaths. Let's say there's 100,000 deaths. So if we had never even said the word coronavirus and we just closed our eyes, this just would have been a nasty flu season. And yes, of course, every death is horrible, but also every death caused by economic shutdown is horrible. So there's rising child abuse cases, domestic abuse, suicides, drug addiction, deaths related from drug addiction. But anyway, the health scare was one uncertainty. And so that now we have huge certainty, not 100%, but we're on a scale of 0 to 10. 2 weeks ago, we were at a 1 or a 2. Now we're at more like a 7 or 8. Now, by the way, even when we were at a 1 or a 2, the things that we were talking about here on this IG Live are exactly the things that happened. They were sort of common sense, and I don't know why nobody listened to common sense. I think they were trying to always imagine a worst case scenario and scare people into staying indoors instead of giving a common sense answer. But who knows? Maybe that's how you treat huge populations of people. I don't know. It's just, I know that my story has not changed in the past 3-4 weeks about what was going to happen. For people who were on this IG Live 3.5 weeks ago, we were saying, look at April 15th as the peak in the country. Look at June 1st as the end, or May 31st or whatever, give or take a week. And that's what's going to happen. And here's where I was wrong. I was saying the economy needs to reopen in the first week of April. Maybe I was wrong, maybe I was right, but I do think the stimulus package pushed it back, that the time we needed to be back in the economy till the end of April. Meanwhile, the second type of uncertainty that we had was financial uncertainty. We were losing our jobs. We didn't know what was going on with the stimulus package. We didn't know if our small businesses were going to survive. We still don't know what industries are going to survive. But now the stimulus package is going to be passed. Now there's strong suggestion that, we're seeing the Northern European countries go back to work. We're seeing the Asian countries back at work, and there's no new spikes in cases. And, there's a heavy indication that the U.S. is going to get back to work pretty quickly from here. So we're seeing some certainty on the economic side. Here's where there's a little bit of uncertainty is we don't know someone just told me this phrase, we don't know what the collateral fatalities were because of this crisis. So how many people who couldn't get tested for cancer went beyond the tipping point of their cancer during these past few weeks? How many people who didn't get treatment for high blood pressure had strokes or heart attacks this past few weeks? So there were a lot of medical conditions that we ignored to focus on coronavirus. So if you lived in a state with millions of people but only 200 cases of coronavirus, you still couldn't get tested for your cancer. Was your chemotherapy working? You couldn't get tested. And for those 200 cases of coronavirus and maybe just a handful of deaths, which is sad, all these millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people couldn't get tested for other diseases and fatalities and so on. So this is a little bit of a sad thing that occurred. We don't know the answer to that yet. And I hope we study this because I hope we never have an economic shutdown again. I do think the economic shutdown was a huge mistake. I think the probably amount of cases and the amount of people who would have died or gotten severely sick, that number probably didn't change much because we did an economic shutdown. It's starting to turn out that the way you get this virus is by being heavily exposed to other people who have the virus. So for instance, on the cruise ships, huge numbers of people who were on a cruise ship where there was coronavirus, huge numbers of people got it. Not because they passed someone in the hallway by accident who had it. They got it because they were exposed every day to people with coronavirus. So that's how you get it, is being exposed a lot. That's why 15% of the newly hospitalized in New York are healthcare workers, sadly, because they are heavily exposed to the virus. So it's not clear that being, far away from people makes you get it at all, or even being 3 or 4 feet from people. So I'm not so sure about all the lockdowns and the social distancing and the economic shutdown. I think that was preparing for the worst case, but I hope the government really analyzes the data. But here's some interesting kind of thoughts and data. So first off, let me see where I've written this down. First off, New York City and New Jersey together combined are 54% of the cases of the deaths in the United States. 54%, just New York City and New Jersey. If all you had done was shut down New York City and New Jersey, you could have kept maybe most of the country open. And it turns out 32 states account for less than 85 deaths a day. So each state has millions of people, but 32 of the states, more than, enough states to represent 200 million people in the US, account for less than, 85 deaths a day. And I think it's something like, 2 dozen of those states account for less than 25 deaths a day. And for that, we shut down, tens of millions of people went unemployed. So again, I think the economic shutdown was a big mistake. I think next time, we'll be much closer to cures or at least pills to alleviate symptoms. We're also going to probably be a lot healthier. We'll think a lot more about, who we are exposed to. There's not going to be large gatherings anytime soon. But I also think, maybe next time we have just different policies. Maybe if you're over the age of 65, you have to do a lockdown, but everybody else continues going to work. Who knows? I think you could change the policy to be much easier on the economy and avoid all these collateral fatalities without having to do a complete shutdown, and you'll still have the same results. I think this is important things to think about as, everyone's going to be pounding their chest like, we're the winners, or the Democrats are going to say, I'm a winner, or Republicans are going to say, I'm a winner. But I think we have to take a step back and say, without throwing blame, we have to see what decisions could we have made differently or better, because a lot of people were hurt. If you were sick from another illness, you were hurt. If you lost your job, you were hurt. If you were subject to domestic abuse, you were hurt. If you got more addicted to alcohol or drugs, you were hurt. So we need to have a more holistic, to use the word, a more holistic approach to this virus. By the way, though, what a horrible decade we've had so far. This decade has been, can it actually get worse? January 2nd, correct me if I'm wrong, and this decade had started off horrible. The only good day of this decade so far was January 1st, where I did absolutely nothing. And what else happened this decade? January 2nd, all the headlines were these fires in Australia. I don't even know what happened afterwards. What happened to the fires in Australia? I'm going to have to Google this. Are there still fires happening in Australia? What's going on? So that was January 2nd. But then the news from Australia disappeared. January 3rd, we bombed some guy from Iran. I never heard of him before. Soleimani, whatever. We bombed this guy. We killed him. And it's amazing to me, we were able to send a drone all the way across the world, directly target one human being, and get him. Every time I log on to Zoom, I can't even figure out the audio. Computers still need work, but we've got our killing machines down. But suddenly, January 3rd, everything went from, oh my gosh, global warming, Australian fires, to are we entering World War III? And then a week later, that wasn't in the news anymore. How desperate is the news that World War III wasn't even a big enough news item? So Iran, I don't even know what happened after that. I don't know what happened to Iran. And then the next thing was Megxit. Like Prince Harry suddenly announces he's going to quit his family. I didn't even know you can quit your family. Like I would have done that decades ago. He just called up his grandma and said, Grandma, I'm quitting this family. And he flies to Canada. He flies as far as he can. He lands in Canada and what does he find? All the currency has his grandma's face on the currency. So I don't know what's happening now because he's out of the news. Then there was the impeachment. One of the most important things in American history. You know, there's only been 3 presidents now impeached. Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and now Donald Trump. So the impeachment was like this amazing reality show of very old white LGBTQ men and Donald and now it's out of the news. It happened and then it just disappeared. And then coronavirus happened and it's been insanity ever since. Like and the headlines are just day after day after day worse. Like now there was a headline. The headline today I saw, the only headline I saw, I looked at the newspaper headline as I was passing it in the street. Cuomo and Trump are fighting over ventilators. That's the news headline? Like, what about the fact that hospitalizations are down day after day? What about the fact that 32 states don't seem to have any real effect at all from coronavirus? Why can't we just send them back to work so people could have jobs and pay for their families and pay for food again and so on? So the headlines are still crazy, but I'm a little bit nervous. What are they going to put? I bet you every day this summer there's going to be some headlines. Second wave coming. Are you ready? And they're going to keep trying to scare us. Let me see. I don't see people writing, but hopefully I'm connected. But the connection is a little slow. So I'm going to answer some questions, but also make some more comments. Here's one comment. In New York City, I don't know if you live in New York City, but in New York City, we saw this in Italy. They're all quarantined, and they started singing these beautiful songs, and it was in the night. You see these YouTube videos in the night, like suddenly one voice would rise above, and then all the voices would join in this chorus of beautiful music. So, I don't know, in New York City, we don't sing as good as Italians. Italians have a tradition of singing and opera and all this stuff. So in New York City, we clap. So it's 7 p.m. every day. People in New York City, all over Manhattan at least, and maybe all over New York City, people clap for the workers, like the people working in your building, like the superintendents and the doormen, and then people clap for the delivery people, and people clap for the healthcare workers. And these people are really heroes and doing an amazing job. But it feels, to me, tell me what you think, it feels a little weird, like just, we all open our windows for the first time in a day and we start clapping, and these people, their lives are on the line. We've just been binge watching Tiger King all day. Don't forget, it's 7 p.m. We've got to clap for 1 minute for all these people who are just satisfying all of our needs now while we've been eating popcorn and watching Tiger King all day. And then we get back after a minute to watching Tiger King. It just feels a little weird. It feels like the class divide is being underlined by this coronavirus. And I don't feel that comfortable with the clapping. I feel we should just don't forget to tip these people, because that's what they really need, is they really need money if they're the ones who are putting their lives on the line while you're getting a chance to catch up on, Tiger King or whatever it is you're catching up on. So I just feel a little weird with that. And look, I'm guilty of it too. I clap as well because I don't want to be shamed into not clapping, if I don't clap. So I don't know. And then Zoom has become this big thing. And I love it. I love the fact that I no longer, and I think this is going to continue. This trend is going to continue. We're never going to have to go travel for business meetings again. And now there's entire business conferences that are happening via Zoom. So Zoom has changed everyone's work life. And by the way, it hasn't changed it. This was a trend that was happening, like video conferencing. The technology is only there right now. Like, we're only able to do this right now because bandwidth is fast enough. It wasn't fast enough after 9/11. It wasn't really fast enough during the 2009 financial crisis, but it's fast enough now. So we don't have to go to meetings, travel for meetings anymore. We don't have to go to conferences. And, a lot of communication's nonverbal, but I get it. So when you're on Zoom with somebody, there's pros and cons. You might not get all of the communication you would get if you visited the person personally, but you'll get a lot. You'll get like 90% there, and maybe because you're saving so much time and money not traveling, there's the pros outweigh the cons. And we'll see what happens. But I do think like it's weird though how the national discussion changes depending on what the extreme crisis is. Like my kids have not mentioned, I have 5 kids, and they have not mentioned climate change to me since January 2nd, since the Australian fires. Like suddenly it was Iran, impeachment, then coronavirus. And last year it was all climate change. Like when are you going to get metal straws? When are you going to get rid of the plastic straws? So my wife actually hid the plastic straws. We got 2 metal straws, but we secretly used the plastic straws. Because, by the way, metal straws, to make 1 metal straw is the same carbon footprint as making 10,000 plastic straws. And at the rate I use straws, I would have to leave my metal straw in my will to my kids in order for this metal straw to really outweigh the carbon footprint it costs to make it. So, I don't know what we're going to do about climate change. Maybe this virus saved the game because there's less pollution, but who knows? And I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm going to have some water. You gotta stay hydrated during coronavirus. So I wanted to talk about how I think about ideas and how to generate ideas. And I have this concept I've been calling idea math. And so first off, I've talked a lot about idea sex, where you take 2 different ideas and you combine them to make a new idea. So for instance, BuzzFeed, you can argue, is a combination between traditional news and the internet. Creates BuzzFeed. PayPal is a combination between currency, paying for things, and the internet. Uber is this combination between taxi cabs and smartphones. So, I mentioned yesterday a great example, which is the Fugees took, here's another one. I don't know if you like to tango, but there's a band called, or a musical group called the Gotan Project, which takes a hip hop beat, combines it with tango music, and now they're the best, because they're the only ones doing it, they're the best in the world at kind of hip hop tango. So if you could take 2 very popular ideas, combine them, and even though the ideas, like Gotan Project was probably never going to be the best hip hop group in the world, nor were they going to be the best tango music in the world, but the combination of these 2 very popular musical and dance themes, the combination of them, they became the only player, and so they're the best in the world. So I always encourage people, come up with a list of ideas and then see how you can combine them. And the results are fascinating. But more than idea sex, I also think about things like idea addition. So, I look at all types of ways of combining ideas. So for instance, what's an example of idea addition? So let's say you're trying to come up with your own diet. So people talk about the paleo diet, which is, this is what your cavemen ate, this is what your ancestors ate 70,000 years ago, so it's what we're naturally evolved to eat, which is like mostly meat and protein and no processed foods, no processed carbs and so on. So that's the paleo diet. What's another kind of diet? Intermittent fasting. And so that's when you skip 1 or 2 meals a day, or you only eat between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. So what about, let's have, I've seen now, let's add to the paleo diet this intermittent fasting idea. I've seen references to multiphasic paleo diet, which is intermittent. You eat at random intervals, but you eat paleo, because cavemen did not eat every day at 8 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. They didn't have regularly scheduled times for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's an addition to the paleo diet by throwing in paleo conception of time and when paleo people would eat in terms of time. So not only what they would eat, but when they would eat. So that's an addition. That's an example of idea addition. I want to talk about another one, which is idea multiplication. So this is a very powerful one for business. Let's say you have, I'm just thinking of one off the top of my head, but let's say you have, let's say you're a copywriter. So you write advertising copy for your local dentist. So You interview the dentist, and you write this whole advertisement. You put the advertisement in and on a Facebook ad, and you target people who live in that town. Go to this dentist, and the dentist sees a huge 50% uptick in patients. So that's one dentist. Now let's do idea multiplication. You can package that ad campaign up and sell that ad campaign, which includes all the writing that you did, all the research that you did, all the research on Facebook advertising, plus how to do the best Facebook advertising. You can now multiply that, and you could target dentists. Hey, increase your sales by 50%, and you could sell the ultimate ad package for dentists. Dentist in a box ad package. You could sell that to the 6,000 or the 50,000 dentists across the country. Why not? So that's idea multiplication, where you take some idea that you did for one generic person and you multiply it by all the people in that category. So that's an example of idea multiplication. Another one, idea exponentials. So we heard a lot about exponential growth with the coronavirus, but essentially, in a nutshell, if you have one hamster and it gives birth to two hamsters, which each one of those give birth to two more hamsters, then in 10 of those you have 1,000,000 hamsters. 10 more of those you have 1,000,000,000,000 hamsters. So exponential growth is pretty good. So here's a technique for writing a book. Day one, write down, and this is how I write books, by the way. So day one, write 10 ideas for chapters of your book. Now, just a good technique when writing chapter titles for your book, you want to make them unusual so people can't just look at the table of contents and say, oh, I know all this already. So you want to make your chapters intuitive, but not so intuitive that people immediately understand. You want people to read the chapters. So instead of just saying the word gratitude, maybe you say, like let's say you're writing a self-help book. Instead of just saying calling one chapter gratitude and another chapter positive thinking, maybe you come up with an unusual way of doing it. Like, difficult perception problems is, or dealing with chaos is the gratitude chapter. And the second chapter, which is instead of calling it positive thinking, you call it intermittent negative thinking, or something like that. So anyway, idea exponentials. For day one, you write down your 10 chapter ideas. Day two, you start taking each chapter and you divide that chapter into 10 bullet points that chapter is about. You do that for all the chapters. When you're done with all that, you start making lists of 10 ideas for each bullet point, and you keep going until you're as nuanced as possible. So you have this tree of the book, and now you just start filling in all the bullet points, and that's using this idea of idea exponentials. You've just written a book, and that's a great, fast way. You could write a book, trust me on this, because I've done it and I've seen other people do it. You could write a book in about 2 or 3 weeks using this method. Now, the very first idea list. So what happened was in 2002, I was dead broke, and I was living right next to the World Trade Center. I was losing my home. I owed money to the IRS. I was really depressed. I was really scared. I had lost all my money, and I would just take these huge walks every single day. One time, I went into this restaurant supply store, and I saw they had this whole box of waiters pads for $10. They had 100 waiters pads for sale for $10, so 10 cents a pad. And I figured, you know what? I'm going to buy this. And so I started every day going to a cafe early in the morning, reading a little bit just to get the mind greased and going, and then started writing 10 ideas a day down on these waiters pads. Because the great thing about a waiters pad is you can't write like a whole book here. You can only write bullet points. So it was very good for just 10 ideas. And my first idea list was, the very first idea list I wrote of 10 ideas were, I came up with an idea for a book, which is, the title was going to be called How to Beat Your Friends at Every Game in the Universe. And the idea was, for every game you could think of, chess, checkers, Monopoly, Scrabble, poker, I had like 2 or 3 tips where if you knew those simple tips, you would be able to beat all of your friends who don't normally know those tips. So for instance, Scrabble, if you just know 2 things, you'll be able to beat all your friends at Scrabble. If you know all the 2-letter words, and there's about 100 of them, like most people don't know that XI is a legal word in Scrabble. Most people don't know that ZA, QI, KI, KA, these are all legal, XU. All of these are legal words in Scrabble. So if you know like XU, that's a good way to get rid of an X. If you know that's a legal 2-letter word, you have a huge advantage over other people who don't know the 2-letter words. Second tip is know all the Q without U words. So for instance, cat, Q-A-T, Kopf, Q-O-P-F, Knot, Q-A-N-A-T. If you know all the Q without U words, you're going to win at Scrabble. So I started making a list. Well, checkers, poker, Scrabble, Monopoly. Like, okay, guess which color you should own on the Monopoly board in order to in order to basically beat all your friends in Monopoly. This is the simplest tip. And the answer is the orange colors, which is like St. James Place, New York Avenue, Tennessee Avenue. If you know if you own the orange properties, then you're going to win almost every game of Monopoly. And the reason is, it's kind of an interesting reason, the most popular square to land on in Monopoly is the jail square, because you could either land on the jail from the dice, you could land on the go to jail square, which sends you to jail. You could pick up the 2 community chest cards, which send you to jail. So jail is the most popular square to be on. And the most popular roll of 2 dice is a 7, which puts you right in the middle of the orange properties. So if you own the orange properties, everyone's gonna have to pay rent on your orange properties. So I would even trade like Boardwalk, the most expensive property, for New York Avenue, because it's an orange property and it's much more valuable to own the orange properties. So I basically built out that book using this idea of idea exponential. So here's all the games I want to do, and then for each game, here's all the tips, and then I even came up with book number 2 and book number 3 in the same series. So I did all the card games like spades, hearts, bridge, crazy eights, whatever. So idea exponentials are very valuable. Another thing very valuable is what I call idea subsets. So everyone always says, oh man, ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is everything. And that's just not true at all. First off, good ideas are not a dime a dozen. If you write down 10 ideas a day, that's 3,650 ideas a year, you might come up with 2 or 3 really good ideas. Probably not more than that. But people forget, execution is a spectrum. You could have bad execution, and then over here you have good execution. How you execute a business, it makes or breaks a business. So, and execution ideas are a subset of ideas. So if I have an idea for a business, like the other day, I made a list for myself, 10 ideas for businesses coming out of this coronavirus lockdown. And then I picked one of them, and I wrote 10 ways I would implement this idea. And so execution is very hard. You have to build the execution idea muscle. And again, execution ideas are a subset of ideas. So if you're not exercising the execution idea muscle, you're going to be very poor at execution. So and again, execution ideas are just ideas focused on execution. So execution and ideas, you can't separate them out. Whoever says ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is everything, hasn't really understood the nature of how one executes. So all of this stuff is very important for creativity. There's also idea division. So what would be an example? So idea division is you take a big problem and you solve it, but you can't really implement solving it on a huge issue. So take a look at PayPal. So Peter Thiel started PayPal. We all use PayPal now. And originally, PayPal was for anybody with a Palm Pilot to pay each other. And Palm Pilots disappeared. So Peter Thiel figured, okay, well, let's just have everybody pay each other somehow online. But that was too big of an idea. So he made it smaller and smaller and smaller. He divided and divided and divided until PayPal was just focused on how customers of eBay could pay vendors on eBay. So it became part of the eBay ecosystem. And in fact, eBay even tried to compete with him because he took over the eBay ecosystem of payments, and eBay lost and eventually bought PayPal, and then it became a public company after that, and I don't even know where it is now. But idea division is very important because you don't want to take on a challenge too big to handle. You want to make it as small as possible so that you can succeed very easily. Like let's say you're starting a business. divide and divide and divide and divide your idea until it's small enough that you can demonstrate the effectiveness of the idea, and then you can either raise money, or you can grow slowly, or you can find partners. Like, you want to always be, before you raise money on an idea, you want to always demonstrate that it's successful. The only way you can do that is by dividing and dividing and dividing until it's the smallest problem possible that you're solving. So again, I call this idea math, and there's we talked about idea multiplication, idea addition, idea subtraction, idea division, idea exponentials, idea sets. All of these are useful when looking for, and then there's idea substitution. So for instance, right now, this used to be a good business idea. Let's buy something cheap on Alibaba. So Alibaba sells goods straight from the factories in China, and then you could sell them for more expensive prices on Amazon. So that's called the drop shipping business model, and use Alibaba. But China now is problematic, right? Because when are they going to have the next pandemic? Do people trust China yet? Who knows? So what about other countries that do manufacturing? So there are websites that do the same business model as Alibaba, but are focused on, for instance, Africa, now that trade barriers are going down in Africa. So that's an example of idea substitution. The drop shipping business model still works, but instead of using Alibaba, we're going to take that out and we're going to substitute it with Africa. And so there's a site like Ways to Cap, WAYS2CAP.com, which does drop shipping from Africa. You could buy things cheap on that website and sell it expensive on Amazon. So these are just different ways I think about ideas. So for instance, I just pitched a TV show. I pitched a TV show straight to Airbnb. I just sent it in an email 2 hours ago. So I'm always thinking of ideas and then I share them. And so it's always important to share your ideas. You should always feel like you're abundant in ideas. So even if someone steals an idea, that's at least validation that your ideas are good, and you just keep on coming up with more ideas. So I pitched this idea, which is kind of like an idea addition or idea substitution model. So I forget what the name of this show is. There's a show on, I think, HGTV, it's actually the most popular show in the world, and I forget what it's called completely, but basically a couple is looking to buy a home, and they're looking at a cheap house, a medium price house, and an expensive house, and then they decide at the end, and that's the show. And what's interesting is that format is sold now in 100 different countries. So that made it the most popular show in the world. It's sold all over the globe. And so this one little format, which seems like such an easy, stupid idea, has made tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars for the creator of that simple idea. So I took that idea and I did idea sex with it, I guess, with Airbnb. So what if I go to every city? So I lived in Airbnbs for 2.5 years, so I'm kind of an expert at this. What if I go to a city and I stay in the cheapest Airbnb in the city, and then I stay in the most expensive Airbnb in the city, and I invite over like celebrity guests or my friends who are entrepreneurs or my friends who are comedians, and we just hang out and like have an adventure. So in New York City, the cheapest Airbnb I could find, there's a tent in someone's backyard in the Bronx that's $18 a night. Only less than $20 a night. You could stay in this tent in someone's backyard in the Bronx. So I figured that would be a fun place to stay. And then there are places that are like $5,000 a night. Like an abandoned elementary school that's now someone's apartment might be $5,000 a night, and I could Airbnb that as well. And you see, and I invite over celebrities or maybe an actor promoting a movie, or maybe comedians or entrepreneurs or whatever, and we see the difference between, and we have an experience. Maybe we have a challenge or an experience, and the entire show would be New York City, cheapest to most expensive. LA, cheapest to most expensive. Paris, cheapest to most expensive. Wuhan, cheapest to most expensive. That'll be an interesting one. Maybe that's episode number 1. So, and then what do I do with an idea like that? Well, I sent it to one of the founders of Airbnb. So will he ever respond to me? I have no idea. But if you're constantly, having ideas, fleshing them out on the waiter's pad, and then sending them out, then you get really good at the process of cycling through ideas over and over and over again, and you just never know. I've had plenty of times where someone said, hey, that's a good idea, I want you to do it, here's some money, or come visit us at Amazon, or we want you to be on our board of directors, we love these ideas, or come meet with us, we'll give you, I've done so much networking because of this idea sharing, and I've made money from the idea sharing, but more than anything, I've made contacts, networks, friends, and so on because of idea sharing. Like, I'll give you an example. So probably everybody here who's watching this has listened to my podcast. You know that I'm good friends with Kamal Ravikant. He's been on my podcast like 7 times. We're good friends. We live near each other. And I met him because he had a business in 2010, and I wrote an idea list for him. Here's 10 ideas you can do to improve your business. And I sent it to him, and after that, we started becoming really good friends. And so over the course of 10 years now, he's one of my closest friends. So that's an example, the benefits of idea sharing. Another one is one time I sent a list to Google, and the next thing I know, I was giving a Google talk at Google. I sent a list to Amazon about how they can improve self-publishing. Next thing I know, I'm visiting Seattle, I'm visiting Amazon. I didn't know these people necessarily, but if you reach out and you're giving and you're performing a service, you're giving ideas for free, people are always, if they're decent ideas, people are always happy to talk to you. How do you know if they're decent ideas? You don't. But that's why it's important every day to exercise the idea muscle. So even today, I was writing ideas on which industries I think are going to completely fall apart after this period is over. And it's just a way to exercise the idea muscle, because look, if commercial real estate is going to fall apart in New York City, or if restaurants are going to fall apart because they're all out of business now, maybe there are business models that can take advantage of the holes in industry that are going to happen after coronavirus. There's going to be money in the economy. There's going to be trillions of dollars in the economy, and they're going to want that money is going to flow into all the empty holes in the economy. But it might be the case that airlines, commercial real estate, restaurants, movie theaters, all of these things are out of business. And so it's interesting to look at where are the holes and what might replace them and what business models might replace them. So I'm going to answer a few questions now. Jay's been collecting questions. What about inflation? So that's a really good question, because if the Federal Reserve is printing all this money for this stimulus, then if everybody suddenly gets $1 million, then $1 million is not really worth anything. So that's the problem with inflation. So as an example, Zimbabwe, years ago, Zimbabwe printed up a lot of money. I don't know if you could see this, but it's a Zimbabwe $100 billion bill. I think it's $100 billion. So it's a Zimbabwe $100 billion bill because their money became worthless. And so we do not want, the worst thing that could ever happen in the United States and the world is if there's hyperinflation of the US dollar. The whole world depends on the US dollar. Here's the good news. The good news is that right now, inflation only happens when there's demand and when there's full employment. So right now, there's 30% unemployment and there's no demand. So if anything, there's deflation. If I go through my emails right now, I'll bet you I'll see 50 emails telling me like, oh, Postmates is 20% discount. Movie theaters, 20%, these books, 20% discount. Like all of my books, or many of my books that have been published by regular publishers, they're all discounted right now because the publishers aren't making any money. So every product is discounted. So right now, we don't have to worry about inflation because there's actually massive deflation right now. So let's see how long this deflation lasts, but I don't think we're going to have to worry about inflation because we're not getting back to full demand anytime soon, even if the economy gets back to work, and we're not getting back to full employment anytime soon because unemployment is huge. You're gonna in New York City, you're gonna make more if you're unemployed than if you're a school teacher. So people are gonna just stay unemployed as long as they can. So it's not gonna be so fast for people to get back to work. And all these things like student loans are deferred, taxes are deferred, all sorts of things are deferred. So people don't really need as much money right now, and they're gonna get paid a lot. Even the unemployed are gonna get paid a lot more than they're used to. And so I don't see full employment coming back, and I think deflation is a long time before we turn into inflation. What will happen to the real estate market? Well, look, a lot of buildings, let's look at commercial real estate, which is offices. So a lot of buildings in New York City are their offices are rented out to a single company. What's that company? WeWork. Well, WeWork, first off, even before coronavirus, it was becoming pretty clear that WeWork was a scam or a Ponzi scheme. But WeWork now is a disaster. First, everybody, if you were going to work in a WeWork, you might as well just work at home on Zoom and meet people on Zoom. You could have a Zoom meetings every day with all your colleagues. And who knows, if all your colleagues, I've been wondering this, if you're a man and all your colleagues are women and you have a Zoom meeting, does everybody's period start to synchronize? If you're on a Zoom meeting with everybody, time will tell. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting science experiment. But WeWork is totally out of business. In fact, SoftBank, which was funding WeWork, just decided to pull the plug on them. They're not going to fund them. And WeWork's the biggest renter in New York City. So commercial real estate, at least in New York City and other urban areas, is going to completely die. So I don't know what's going to happen there. That could be the next financial crisis, but commercial real estate's dead. Residential real estate, that will go down, but residential real estate always goes back up. And again, there's going to be all this stimulus money. It's going to be cheap to refinance your home. It's going to be cheap to buy a new home. It's going to be cheap to buy a home. So I don't know. I would never buy a home, but I do think residential real estate goes down and then starts to recover. Did we overreact? This is a good question. Yes, we absolutely overreacted, but maybe we should have. We didn't know how dangerous, the average person was scared. We didn't know how dangerous this virus was going to be. We didn't even know if it was like biological warfare. We didn't know everybody was saying, oh my God, like 700 million people are going to get this and 140 million people are going to die. Like I actually saw in the beginning of coronavirus, I saw at least one article or many articles that said there's up to 140 million people around the world are going to die because everybody's going to get it. 7 billion people in the world, 2% fatality rate, 140 million people are going to die. So that was totally ridiculous. I never once believed that, but a lot of people did. And that kind of triggered all of the reactions and the fear and the overreactions and the panic. Did we overreact? Absolutely. We should not have shut the economy down. A lot of Asian countries did not shut the economy down, and you could say, oh, well, they quarantined and tested. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. Not all of them did as much as you think. And the Northern European countries, they barely shut down at all. Sweden, and I don't think Sweden never shut down, and they're already back to work. So their economy didn't suffer at all. So I don't think we should have shut the economy down. I think there was probably an in-the-middle solution, but okay, we made some mistakes. Let's see what happens. We'll find out. And hopefully the next time we won't do this because you can't do this again. There's no such thing as shutting an economy down. That's an experiment. We did a huge, giant experiment, which has changed the lives of maybe 100 million people or more around the world. 30 million people in the US are going to go unemployed. This is a devastating experiment. And so hopefully we never do an experiment like this again. And I don't think we needed to do it. There's going to be some people who said, oh no, we had to lock down everybody. No, we didn't. There's so much evidence now. By the way, 2 months ago, did you ever think that you would start using the words viral load and viral shedding over and over again? Now it's like common phraseology. Oh, the viral load of coronavirus is huge. So the way you get coronavirus is you have to be inundated with it by someone else who has it. So if you're just walking around and you pass someone in the street, I doubt anyone has gotten coronavirus from that. There is no evidence of that whatsoever. People usually know where they got it. Like a common story is, I was sitting on a plane and this guy next to me was coughing on me for the entire 3 hours. That's how people get coronavirus. So it's unlikely to just get it from not social distancing or going to work. If you're in a normal workplace where everybody's spread out anyway, it's very unlikely you're going to get coronavirus. So we didn't need an economic shutdown. I really don't think so. The data will tell, but the data is already suggesting, look at all the states that had basically 0 cases of this, or almost 0 cases, negligible cases. So even right now, 32 states, representing more than 200 million people in the United States, 32 states have hardly any cases at all, like maybe 200 cases, 300 cases, and hardly any, severe cases. Why aren't they back at work? So we're still overreacting. What is the future of K-12 education? Well, I think there's going to be a lot more remote and online homeschooling. And I know this is hard for parents to hear, but schools suck. Like, we're not intended to go study English, study Spanish for 42 minutes. Oh, now it's gym for 42 minutes, which, by the way, is a nightmare. And then it's mathematics for 42 minutes. And then it's biology for 42 minutes. And then it's arts and crafts for 42 minutes. That's not the way humans learn things. So I think education is going to change, the nature of homework. Like, homework is just a shame that 16-year-old kids have to stay up all night to do homework. I remember one time, I go downstairs in the middle of the night, my daughter is crying, like tears falling on her biology book because she has so much homework. It's just a disaster. And I think now that we're seeing a shift in education because of this coronavirus, that if you could come up with a business model with online education for kids, that's a huge winning business model right now. So I think that's going to change. And one time I was part of when I was a kid, I was part of an experimental program where instead of being taught in 42-minute sessions, I took math and I had to, from 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, or from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, all we did was math. So a bunch of us would be in a classroom, and there were teachers who were walking around, and so I'd raise my hand whenever I needed help. Whenever I was taking a test, I'd raise my hand, take the test, or whenever I needed help, I'd raise my hand, get the help, and everybody was working at their own speed. So that was the experiment, and the experiment was great. Within 3 weeks, I had taken, this was a summer program, I had taken, and I was going into 6th grade or 7th grade. I took Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Trigonometry, all the way up to Calculus in 3 weeks. So, and then I was able to skip all these classes in high school later on because I didn't need to take any math classes because of this 1 3-week program. So education is better when it's focused and focused on one subject, and usually it's even best when it's focused on one subject that the kids are interested in. So I was interested in math. So education should change. Like, I ask people, there's these topics that I learned every single year in history class in high school and even junior high school. Here's one fact. When was Charlemagne born? Can you tell me within 500 years? I always ask this to people. No one ever gets it right within 500 years unless they look it up online. And this is a fact we learned every single year of high school. So the memory, we're not going to remember things we're not interested in. And it's okay. We're not going to remember most facts. In a classroom, you develop classroom skills. In the real world, you develop real world skills. They are very different. Real world skills cannot be taught in the classroom. Classroom skills can't be taught in the real world. And so what we're going to see, I hope, are business models which start to teach real world skills to our kids as opposed to just classroom skills. So I think that's how K to 12 education is gonna happen. When will concert education bounce back? When will concert businesses bounce back? So, like, right now, nobody's going to Madison Square Garden for a music concert. I don't think they're going to bounce back so fast. It's not like May 1st, the doors open, I go outside and say, oh my gosh, let's go to the Knicks game, or let's go to the Yankees, or let's go see, Bruce Springsteen in concert. It's not going to happen so fast. It's going to be a slow process. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to have much more certainty on a cure for the next pandemics. Now, it's amazing that in just a few weeks, we've gone from zero knowledge of coronavirus to 30 drugs in medical trials right now in coronavirus. And you can't get into trials unless you've done all of these other things. So the science is getting done at incredible speeds. So that's an interesting thing that's happened that I've learned in this coronavirus, is that the science for these cures is much more advanced than I thought. And that should give us comfort the next time there's a pandemic. So again, just to summarize, kind of on the data side, what we're seeing again is fewer hospitalizations in New York City. Again, California, Washington, Oregon, and even New York, they don't need any more ventilators. We're done on the ventilators. Second, New York City and New Jersey, just these two areas alone, account for more than 50% of all the deaths in the United States that have happened from coronavirus. Did we really need to shut down the entire country and tens of millions of people go out of work? I don't think so. 32, and it's not spread out among the other 48 states. There's about 25 states that have fewer than, 20 deaths a day in those states. And those are states with millions of people each. They should be going to work. It's a shame that so much heartache has happened during this process. And so after that, I went through kind of theories about how I write down ideas. So I talked about idea sex and then idea math, which is I talked about idea addition, idea subtraction, idea multiplication, idea division, idea substitution, idea exponentials. And these are all the different ways to come up with ideas. And then it's so powerful for me to take those concepts about ideas, and it allows me to very quickly generate lots of ideas. Once I got very familiar with them, I write down ideas every day on the waiter's pad. Another benefit of the waiter's pad, by the way, very important benefit. When I go to a business meeting and I put my waiter's pad on, everybody pulls out their, fancy $200 notebook and their expensive pen and whatever. I just put out my waiter's pad and put it on the table. 100% of the time, somebody in the room says, "I'll take fries with that burger." And I laugh politely. And then they say, "Well, why do you have a waiter's pad?" And I say, "Well, it's very easy to take notes. It's also very easy to keep track of who's around the table because a lot of the waiter's pads have a table at the top. And I'm very frugal. I bought these for 10 cents a pad." So people appreciate all these qualities that I just mentioned about the waiter's pad. And if I'm in a meeting where I'm selling something, it's nice to immediately be in this playful way, the center of attention when you're selling something. So the waiter's pad has actually helped me make big sales. And so, again, I write these ideas on the waiter's pads. I went through all these the differences between ideas and execution, why I share, and all this kind of idea math. And then, again, we went over why this is the worst decade of all time. And I'm just scared of what's going to be. What are the newspapers going to do next? How are they going to scare us again? There was the fires in Australia. Then there was World War III with Iran. Then there was Megxit, which was pretty scary. Prince Harry quit his family. Then there was the impeachment hearings, which is like the worst reality show of all time. It was just a bunch of like old white men arguing until I realized that 90% of them were LBGT, whatever. They were much more diverse than I initially thought. And then there was the coronavirus. How's the media they're going to go out of business, the media, because they're not going to be able to scare us anymore. We're impervious to being scared now. What are they going to do? I have no idea what the headlines will be 2 months from now. But join me tomorrow, Instagram Live, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This time, send me questions at altucher@gmail.com or post them on Twitter. Or Jay Yao, who works with me, is always keeping track of the questions here, and he puts them on a Google Docs that I take a look at. I answered all the questions that he put up here. Thanks for joining me. I will share this not only on my IG stories, but I will also share this on YouTube. And yesterday's video is going to go on YouTube as well. So I'm going to start sharing these on YouTube so you can see them or share them or recommend them. But have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. and I'll talk about business ideas and entrepreneurial ideas and stuff like that tomorrow, and investments. So see you soon. Bye.